interrogation, an argument around the issues we are looking at. And those of us who were there yesterday, we are heated arguments around this because whether you like it or not, issues around queerness will always will always elicit a lot of controversies. And when people begin to bring in their religious perspective, their cultural perspective, which will try to shadow the intellectual and academic perspective to certain things. So we saw many of them playing out yesterday. And it's important that we're having such conversations because we need to begin to address and engage some of these issues. When people begin to pontificate what literature should look at and what we shouldn't look at, what we should study and what we should not study. And so some of us who were there yesterday saw all the arguments coming up and then the presenters trying to take care of one or two things that were pointed out. But it was so much that some person tried to fault the panel itself because looking at some of the presentations, it did not augur well with the panel, but it all boils down to the same issue. When people are too personal with issues that borders on queerness, gay, and same-sex relationship. And so while the panel calls for rethinking around the issue, coming of age narrative, how literature, how scholarship, how society is handling the coming of age issue around homosexuality, same-sex relationship. Some other persons insisted or choose to make us to continue to go back and begin to go into that argument, whether it's an African thing or whether it's a Western thing or thereabout. And we keep saying that the argument has gone beyond that to begin to look at contestations where we are in rethinking the issues around the LGBTIQ narrative. So we are continuing with the conversation this morning, and we are looking forward to having interested discussions around this issue from 5 panelists who are supposed to be here. So I don't know, quickly, the first presenter should be Mohammed Adamu Baraya. I don't know whether Mohammed Baraya is physically present or online. Mohammed and Abulaziz Bako, Gombe State University, discussed analysis on homosexuality in Islam, Northern Nigeria in perspective. Okay. The second presenter, Somtochukwu Metu, Anikayodes, and then he sang a lullaby and compulsory heterosexuality. Somtochukwu Metu. I don't know if you are here or online. Okay. Somtochukwu will go first, and then the third presenter, Ifeoma Cassandra Nebife. I think she's online. Navigating Faith. Cassandra, I can see you. Okay. Okay, and then next presenter, Peter Osimiri. Okay, please, do you mind joining me here? Okay, Peter Osimiri will be talking to us on the ethics of homosexuality. The ethics. Is it okay? Ethics. What is there is okay, ethics. Yeah, ethics. Sorry, it's ethics. The ethics of homosexuality, a Yoruba perspective. Yesterday we had a Hausa perspective and all of that, so it's interesting to also see a Yoruba perspective today. And then the last but not the least, Eugene Yakubu, gender as performance. Eugene, okay. Thank you. Welcome once more, as we hope to sustain the tempo of the conversation and see how much we can begin to negotiate and discuss this important issue in scholarship. Okay, having said all of that, 15 minutes for presentation. 10. Okay, 10 minutes for presentation, so we can have time for, and it's important, we keep begging, it's important that the presenters be time conscious set your time. You mustn't wait for us to give you a minute or two. Set your time now, look at it, go straight to your presentation. It's important to get feedback. I think it's not just about coming to talk to us and then we clap for you and you go. I'm sure we can't say that knowledge has really exchanged. So it's important you give us that time for your presentation. So 10 minutes, time yourself there as quickly as possible. Let's see if we can have at least up to 30 minutes to engage you in your presentation. So, Metu, sorry. Yeah, some tomato, right?
Yes.
Mohammed is not here, so some tomato. Okay, 10 minutes.
Okay.
The time has
Good
started.
morning. Let me quickly share my screen.
Is there a problem?
No, she's not. She's trying to share her screen.
So maybe while you are trying to do that, can you be speaking to your paper?
Okay. Good morning. So this morning I want to explore how compulsory heterosexuality is explored in Somtochukwu and Nikayude's, and then he sang Lullaby. So for the introductory part of the work, I'll have to first of all look at juxtapose heterosexuality and homosexuality, the concept of heteronormativity, to at least give us an idea of maybe the setting of the novel and the relevance of heteronormativity as a recognized institution that houses or recognizes only heterosexuality as the forms of sexuality for everybody that is living in Nigeria, which happens to be the country where the novel is set. But it is also backed by law due to the Same-Sex Marriage Prohibition Act of 2014, which prohibits any form of sexual encounter. First of all, marriage, which attracts a 14-year jail term. And then I think a 10-year jail term for any person that is found in a sexual relationship with the same sex. So for the sake of course, we know that heterosexuality, we are talking about sexual relationship between people of different sex, and of course, homosexuality, same sex, and then heteronormativity, the normalization of hetero relationship, especially in countries or nations where homosexuality is prescribed. So with this background in mind, and then also bearing in mind that for this particular text, where we are looking at the text itself is a Bildungsroman about August, two young men, August and Shegun. We also have to look at the kind of environment that they are in. The setting of the text being majorly in Nsukka and the Enugu metropolis, and then the country being Nigeria. But as of then, apart from the fact that we are going to look at, we are looking at the same-sex marriage, the Same-Sex Marriage Prohibition Act of 2015. We are also going to explore how, through this text, the danger of compulsory heterosexuality, because what it does is to force people that do not want to participate, or people that are not heterosexual, to become heterosexual. And the major danger of this forceful or compulsory heterosexuality is internalized homophobia, which we can see the character August, exhibiting to an extent. But it will get to a point in the narration of, or the exploration of these texts, we tried as much as possible to juxtapose these two major characters and how they try as much as possible to, how they respond to the Same-Sex Marriage Prohibition Act, their actions towards each other, their actions towards the people around them, the reaction of their family members towards their sexuality. So if we are to quickly move to the literature review, we'll find out, of course, that the text is relatively new, but that doesn't mean that there haven't been texts that have dealt with, homosexuality or compulsory heterosexuality in the past. Like if we are to look at the works of, in contemporary literature, if you have, for example, to look at the works of Romeo Uriugun, his poems have explored some of his poems, like Bondsmen, Sacrament of Bodies, and what have you. And the works of Obaranta and the works of Chinelo Obaranta under the Odara tree, we'll find out that there are still certain instances where characters in the text are forced to embrace the sexuality that they do not want to. And this is necessitated by the environment that they are in, and also the environment that makes certain kind of rules that makes it very difficult for these characters to fully embrace their sexuality, or to fully embrace because no matter how we want to look at it, someone's sexuality, if you look at it from, there is a particular lens you look at it, is tied to the overall well-being because of a particular person, especially if you're a sexual person, unless you are asexual. So if you remove if you remove or to first want to explore a particular form of sexuality that the person is not kind of used to, it becomes a very big issue. But we cannot just secular work or look at these issues without tying them to a particular theory, as we normally do in literary studies. So for this particular work, I'm going to explore it, or the work is going to be hinged on system justification theory. The major issue with system justification theory is that in a given society, the marginalized, for instance, when it comes to the case of sexuality, that is the homosexuals, the pansexuals, the bisexuals, because of the injustice in the system, they sometimes succumb to whatever it is that the system has to throw to them. This is by Banerjee and Just. The theory was formulated by Banerjee and Just. And a system, of course, justifies the reason why a particular group of people or people are supposed to be put inside or confined in a particular place, as the case of heterosexuality is concerned in Nigeria. So if we are to look at the major characters in the text, or if we are to look these two characters, August and then Shegun, who, of course, when we read the text, we find out that they don't have anything to do with, they don't heterosexuals, but because of their environment has already said, this is the kind of sexuality that you must practice, or this is the sexuality that we want everybody in the nation to be part of. But this is not, sexuality, of course, is innate, no matter how we want to look at it. It's not something that you force people to embrace. And in trying to make people to embrace sexuality that is not in tune with their personality, not just their personality, or the sexuality that is not innate in them, it becomes a problem. But with this particular theory, following the tenets which include internalized system justifying beliefs. One of the issues we will see for the rationalization of the total embracement of heterosexuality, as far as the SSMMPA is concerned, one of the things that we normally hear is that God created Adam and Eve and so on and so forth. And of course, there is man, there is woman, which doesn't bode well for a lot of people. So when people internalize these beliefs, they also project these beliefs to, on other people, which in actual sense doesn't make sense. And when these beliefs are internalized, the next thing in the tenet that follows is the rationalization of these beliefs. And of course, we start hearing that this is not what our ancestors did. We don't have any kind of backing as far as when we are talking about sexuality, first of all, we have to look at the attraction that follows. So, and then the third is the bias to such beliefs due to, economic, social, environmental, and financial stances. And if
Metu,
you
you
are to
should be
look at
sorry, Metu, you should be
yes.
concluding.
Yeah, and if you are to look at other issues that follow with, the results and the findings, if there is compulsory heterosexuality in the text, what are the results that we can find after exploring compulsory heterosexuality in the text? We find out that, of course, with the SSMPA, it stifles fundamental human rights of persons who want to embrace same-sex relationship. And of course, there will be stigma, there will be bullying, which form part of attitude that is meted out to homosexuals. This is actually and then there is internalized homophobia, which happens to be a major issue, a major problem that is, it is actually a major result most times of compulsory heterosexuality. And of course, in conclusion, as far as if there is compulsory heterosexuality, there must be violence accompanied most times by internalized homophobia, which of course becomes a very big issue. So it is necessary, whether we want to admit it to ourselves or not, to fight for the repealment of the SSMPA so that, of course, people that desire to be with the same sex can be with the same sex, and of course, people that desire to be with the opposite sex can also do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that interesting, straightforward presentation. I hope you don't go away. You stay online
No.
as to get back to you at the end of the presentations. Thank you very much. And quickly, let's have Cassandra Ifoma. Can you hear me? Cassandra Ifoma. Cassandra.
Cassandra should unmute herself. She's still muted.
I'm here. I can hear you.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Okay, 10 minutes. The time starts now.
All right. Thank you. I'm Cassandra Ifoma Nebife. The title of, can you hear me?
Meto, can you stop your slide?
Stop sharing.
Stop sharing.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Okay.
It's just that I'm sorry I may not be able to share my slides with you because I'm presenting using my Android phone. But I hope you can follow me. The title of my I'm sorry about that. I would have sent it to you earlier than now because my system can't.
Don't worry, it's not an issue. Go ahead, I can hear you.
Okay. So the title of my paper is Navigating Faith, Society and Identity, a comparative study of queerness in selected works of Disha Filio and Suleiman Adonian. Introduction. So faith, as we know it, is like religion when you place them side by side, and religion is broadly defined as a set of beliefs or behaviors based on shared worldview that separates the sacred or supernatural from the profane. Christianity has been argued to be the world's biggest religion based on the teachings of Jesus Christ. Islam also revealed in its final form by the prophets Muhammad, and also we know about Buddhism based on the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama. So religion and society set up norms, as we know. Dr. Somto has already given us a background to what we're already discussing, and we've been talking about that for some time now, in this conference. So religion and society have set up norms for individuals in the society, which in turn affect the life choices of these individuals. They're expected to conform to these norms set up by the society. And this is what the study would be doing in its analysis. I'll be looking at the statement of the problem of this paper. One of the primary texts in use, Secret Lives of Church Ladies by the Shafilios, has been studied as a text on feminism, racism, sex, hypocrisy of church leaders, and so on. While the other primary text, Silence is My Mother Tongue by Suleiman Adonia, on the other hand, has been read as a text on politics, feminism, fluidity of sexuality, gender roles, patriarchy, and others. So while the various interpretations of this text are illuminating, enough has not been done in the area of making a comparative analysis of both texts in looking at intricate interplay of faith, society, identity in the text. So this paper examines the role of faith and religious teachings in shaping societal attitudes towards queerness. This paper further examines the impacts of secrecy and repression on the mental and emotional well-being of LGBTQ plus individuals. You might be wondering what the aim of this paper it is to point out how individuals deviate from faith, that's their religion, and societal expectations using this primary text, The Secret Lives of Church Ladies and Silence is My Mother Tongue. The objective of this paper is to harness or investigate the divisional tendencies inherent in this selected text, and the researcher would be doing that in looking at the reversal in gender roles as found in the two texts, deviation in sexual preferences as found in the two texts, and also to rethink religion, that's faith as we have it, and society into maybe a balanced purview. Significance of this study. This study is very significant because information from this paper, as is being presented in this conference, will be relevant to institutions working on gender studies or even literature and queer theory. Of course, the theoretical framework employed for this research is queer theory. What we already know by now, what queer theory is about, but because of time, I would just say that queer theory began with Gloria Anzaldúa and other scholars in the 1980s. It could be argued, and we believe that it was influenced by the work of the French post-structuralists or philosopher Michel Foucault, who viewed sexuality as socially constructed and rejected identity politics. So the theory proceeded further through the idea of Teresa de Lauretis in the conference in 1990 and further legitimized it in the academia. So quickly, I would run to the textual analysis of the Shafilios, The Secret Lives of Church Ladies. Looking at the role of faith, what we call religion here, the religious expectations in the text, as they have their faith, we see that the Bible, as we see in the text, when you look at Ephesians 5 verse 13, the Bible says that a young man is expected to leave his father and mother and cleave to a young woman, and the two become one. So the characters in the text have been raised, you know, having this scripture at the back of their mind. So however, having waited for a man to take them, you know, and for them to become one with the men who would take them, it didn't happen. So we see, and after also when you look at the book of Ruth, the characters are trained to believe that they should pray and wait for their Boaz to pick them, just like Ruth in the scripture did. You know, also the Bible teaches that children should honor their father and mother. However, the ladies in the text, that the secret lives of church ladies, have held on delusionally, you know, even when their fathers and mothers do not fulfill their own part of the scripture, which bid parents not to provoke their children to anger. However, their parents expect them to obey them at all circumstances. So despite all these religious expectations, young Black women are ready, as we see in the text, to them family, religion, society, they break free and do exactly, you know, the opposite of what the religion or moral has taught them, because they are now out for happiness and fulfillment. We see deviations from sexual norms. We see that the Christian or religious sexual norm is heterosexual, all right? So it's supposed to be, sexual intercourse is supposed to be between a man and a woman, you know. However, we see deviations or transgressions, you know, towards that. The protagonist of the first story, Eula, waits for her Boaz like Ruth in the Bible, but he's not forthcoming. So on her 30th birthday, we see that she begs her childhood best friend, Carolita, to touch her down there because she has never been touched by anyone down there. So after some time, it now becomes like a norm for them. Every New Year Eve, they book a suite in town, Clarksville town, and they spend the night together drinking champagne, making love to each other and counting down to the New Year. This is because their Boaz has not come to take them, and no man has also come to take them. So they had to deviate from the norm that the society has placed for them. Also, we see Lily, another character in the story, who moves to another town with her lover, Rhonda. These are two young ladies. Later is the only child of her mother, but because of what people would say in church, her mother stops talking to her because of her lesbian partner. Rhonda's mother, on her part, also declares her dead because she came out on the open to declare her sexual preference. Also, we see the young girl, Jael, who is 13 in the text. She has a crush on her pastor's wife. So, and we see her always looking lustfully at the woman until her grandmother finds out about that and stops her from going to church, because it is, for her grandmom, it is unnatural in God's eyes to crush on a woman, worst of all, a pastor's wife. So these are deviations from the lay down sexual expectations that the society expect them to follow. We also see identity, reversal in identity, that's the gender roles. Of course, we know gender roles expectations, where a male child is expected to do this and a female child is expected to do that. So, but in the text, we see that these gender roles are reversed. The female narrator is in charge of the rules guiding her relationships with her the neglected married men that she dates. She's the one that calls the shots.
Cassandra,
where the man. Okay.
Cassandra, you should be concluding. It's your time. It's time.
Yes,
Just
let
conclude.
me run. Okay, briefly on silence is my mother tongue. We also see deviations from gender roles. You know, the major character, is expected to fall in love with a male partner. However, her brother, who is deaf, falls in love with her, and she responds. All right. And also we see that they begin to have sex through their anals. They begin to have anal sex to protect their virginity, because the society expects them to remain virgins till they get married. So they find a way to go around that, having sex with men anally, in order to preserve their virginity to marry. So these are the reversal. You see Hagos, who is deaf in the text, instead of being the one that the society expects to be the man, calling the shot, going to school, because over there, the female is not expected to go to school. However, because he is deaf, he is withdrawn from school, and the sister Saba goes to school, and he in turn begins to do the job that Saba is supposed to do at home, cooking, taking care of the home and all that. That's reversal in gender roles that speaks to fairness as we have it. I would conclude now. In conclusion, this paper finds that there is a yearning to make crucial the need to create safe spaces for self-discovery and acceptance within the religious communities. Consequently, the role of religion, faith, as we know it, in shaping attitudes towards LGBTQ plus individuals is foregrounded. The transformative power of literature in fostering empathy and understanding across cultural and religious divides therefore finds illumination in this paper. Thank you very much for listening.
The clap would have been higher if you had not exceeded by 2 minutes.
I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. You just stand by for questions at the end of the all presentations. So thank you, Cassandra, once more. Quickly, we think that's Osibiri. You are here, right? Okay. Your time starts now.
Please can you share the slides? Mr. Chairman, fellow presenters, ladies and gentlemen, the title of my paper is The Ethics of Homosexuality in Yoruba Perspective. I need to say that this paper is still in the works, and I'm hoping that after this presentation, I will be able to harvest enough responses from the floor, and that, of course, will inform the final paper when I write it. I want to say that I know that this issue is a very combustive one. People are very passionate about the issues of sexuality and sexual orientation. And that's why we've seen the back and forth between Western nations and African nations on this matter. But what I want to do here is what I might call is non-normative ethical analysis I'm doing, which means I'm not trying to say something is right or wrong or provide the standards for right and wrong. I'm basically engaging in an exercise I call anthropological or sociological ethics. The idea is you want to find out what a group of people believe on a particular issue. What is their attitude towards it? For instance, one of the basic questions I'm going to be asking is, what is the status, moral status of homosexuality according to the beliefs of the Yoruba? So anything I say here is not a civil speaking. It's just my interpretation of my understanding of what the Yorubas are saying. In order to be a little bit systematic, I'm going to organize my thoughts along 3 major questions. Number 1, is homosexuality truly un-African? I will examine the question of what's the moral status of homosexuality in Yoruba society. And then finally, briefly talk about why I think that, why is it that we don't have homophobia in traditional Yoruba society? Now, let's go to the question of, is homosexuality African? According to Ajibade 2013, the popular view in sub-Saharan Africa is that homosexuality is an alien foreign import that is being imposed on societies in Africa. I said by logical extension, that position presupposes that homosexuality the position that is present in Traditional Africa is a minority view. I don't know if that is true, but I'm just interpolating from what Ajibade have said. The argument as to whether homosexuality is African or not has gone back and forth, but I cite a few examples of individuals. There are scholars, there are political leaders, and maybe the lay people who have actually argued that homosexuality is not something you find. Now, I need to be very careful. I'm talking about traditional Africa. It's not something you find in traditional African society. For instance, there's this Richard Burton, who conducted a study in 1864 and came up with what he called the Sotadic region. According to him, that region, he actually specified geographically what that region is. And he said, in that region, you will find that homosexuality is indigenous to every society that finds itself within that window. But he said sub-Saharan Africa does not fall under the Sotadic region. So therefore, we cannot have, so therefore, homosexuality is not indigenous to sub-Saharan Africa. And then there is one great scholar. One time it was one time the VC of OAU, Professor Wande Abimbola, who is also a practicing Ifa priest. There was a time they had a meeting, and there was a question thrown to him as to whether homosexuality is African, and this was his response. He said, to start with, homosexuality was never part of our culture, but it could be found in some urban cities in Lagos. He mentioned Lagos and some other places. But then he concluded by saying that there is nothing we can do. If people become homosexual, it's a private issue. There is nothing anybody can do about it. Why should you bother about a private, issue of another person? So that's the way he answered that question. Now, there are also African leaders who have made very strong pronouncements about the fact that homosexuality is alien to Africa. We know of the former president of Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe. He was quoted as saying that the British gay government is always trying to impose homosexuality on Africa. In other words, it's not indigenous to us, it's alien to us, but they're trying to impose it. Then there was one meeting between Barack Obama when he was the president of the US. I think he visited Africa and he was in Kenya. He was talking to Uhuru Kenyatta, who was the then president of Kenya, and was telling him that they should respect the rights of gay people. And the response of Uhuru Kenyatta was that there are certain cultures and values that Africans don't share with the US. So therefore, the US cannot tell us what to do. And then there was a survey that was carried out in 2016 by the International Lesbian and Gay, Bisexual, Trans, and Intersex Association, ILGA, which says that 54% of Ugandans believe that same-sex attraction was an import from the West. 51% of Nigerians think so too, and of course, 49% of Ghanaians. And so we can say that across board, whether you talk about ordinary people, you talk about leaders, talk about some scholars, there are individuals who have argued that homosexuality is alien to Africa. But let me continue. And so there has been a response to this position. There are scholars who have argued, and I think they have argued convincingly, that homosexuality is not necessarily colonial import. You can find pockets of this practice of homosexuality in some African countries, including the Yoruba. There's Sylvia Tamale, who says that same-sex relationship can be found on some African side. So he cited the example of the Langi people in northern Uganda, where he said they have effeminate men who actually get married to others. And there is, we all know that in Nigeria, there is what they call Yandauda in northern Nigeria. So there's a similar, description of these two groups. So the Yandauda also is a group of effeminate people who in Nigeria actually practice homosexuality. Now, That takes me to another thinker who I've actually cited a few examples you will see on the slide. I'm going to be rushing now. Some of the places, Ashanti Kingdom, they said there were male who are employed as sex slaves in that part of the world. And then, of course, there was another argument is that if you look at certain terminologies which predated colonial experience, they suggest that before the colonial era, there was homosexuality, words like adofuro. If you, B.C. Alimi, who is an activist, actually raised that issue, and I think a number of other scholars have done that. And then Tamale again tells us that there's something called ikochane. I don't know if I pronounce it properly, but that's a word for a male wife among the Shagan people in South Africa. Now, one more minute. Now, I've not even got to this is the art of the paper is essentially what is it that the Yorubas believe as the moral status of homosexuality. Now, interestingly, I had, when I do the full paper, I have noticed that there are two women philosophers who are arguing that Africans, I'm talking about Eboduole and Bolatito Abbas, who are arguing that Africans do not accept homosexuality as something that is morally permissible. And then there are two male philosophers. One is Gbenga Desaolu, the other is Mohamed Komalafe, who also argued that Africans are very tolerant and they accept, Yorubas, not African, I'm sorry. Yorubas are very tolerant and they accept homosexuality. Now, let me quickly, because I don't have time, I just want just a few arguments that are raised by those who think that Yorubas do not accept homosexuality. The first argument is what I call the argument from the denunciation of homosexuality by Ifa. I don't have time. I could have read that part of Ifa, and then we'll talk about it. And then there is this statement, this saying that says that somebody, or that says a person, be adofuro, somebody whose eye is red, as one who is engaging in anal sex. And they said that shows a negative attitude towards homosexuality. That is contested anyway by the other two philosophers I've mentioned who are male. And then finally, I call it the argument from procreation and extinction. The idea is that, you see, in the Yoruba cosmology, being is a continuity. And there is a connection, there's a chain of being that goes all the way to God. And that part of that chain of being actually connects us with as ancestors, even with the yet unborn. And that it is the duty of each individual to perpetuate that progeny. And that when you become an homosexual, you necessarily interrupt that process of perpetuation because you may not give birth to children. And that the Yorubas think this is very important for the continuity of the race, of in fact, humanity as a matter of fact, and that it's important that we protect that. That's why one of the major reasons why homosexuality is not accepted by the Yoruba people. I think I will stop there because of time. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. I wish we had time to continue listening to you. And I hope during the time for questions, you may still have opportunity to clarify one or two issues. Okay, I think the last presenter, Eugene Shishet Yakubu. Shishet Yakubu.
Thank you so much, Dr. Asika, for that profound background on sexuality in African literature. I am Eugene Shishet Yakubu. I will be presenting on gender as performance and androgynous space creation in African literature. Permit me to say that queer literatures in Africa are evolving. And that's because the earlier analysis of queer literature in Africa has always come from a cultural perspective, whereby early African authors and scholars tend to argue whether queerness is an African phenomenon or a Western import. But the contemporary Nigerian writers tend to think of queerness as a biological phenomenon, whereby we see writers who discuss queer characters that are that have biological sexuality and are pathologically queer. This paper comes from a psychoanalytical perspective, whereby I use Freudian psychoanalysis to discuss the evidences of queerness in Judy Bear's Working with Shadows and K.C. Lodwika's The Quiet Violence of Dreams. This paper attempts to upset the heteronormativity of diverse sexuality and gender roles to restructure the long-held schema of Africa's strict heterosexuality. And this is because I want to open up spaces for androgynous characters in African literature. With the influx of queer characters in African literature, we tend to see a lot of gender variants, and we tend to see a lot of tomboys, tomboys in African literature. We tend to see a lot of characters that are with their biological sex. So that's the purpose of this paper, to open up a space for androgynous characters in African literature. And why am I doing this? This is to show that we can no longer understand characters based on their pronouns, that is the fact that they are being a he or she, but by societal and social cues and by the way that their way of being in the world, the way they understand themselves. So my analytical framework, I work with Judy Bear's Working with Shadows and K.C. Lodwika's The Quiet Violence of Dreams. Working with Shadows is set in Nigeria. Its main character is Adrian, who is a gender non-conformist and possibly a queer character, as shown in the book. My argument is that Adrian shows very feminine features, but at the end of the day, the book still portrays him as a man. In the discourses of gender performativity by Judy Butler, Judy Butler argues that gender is a social construction whereby a person could go into their wardrobe and pick up the gender of choice that they are going to use. Then with this, we can see that this will totally obstruct literature's understanding of characterization, in the fact that now we are beginning to have characters whose gender performance goes against their biological sexes. In The Quiet Violence of Dreams, the main character, Shepo, is shown as a character who is very effeminate and who is even shown to even be having menstrual cycle and who is even being able to be penetrated from the back as a woman. While this trait of Shepo shows that these are very feminine traits, the book still portrays Shepo as a man. So this work that this research shows that androgynous characters are now part of literature. Now, how do we tend to understand this type of characterization? Should we tend to look at them based on their social cues, their social construction, or their biological makeup? And if you look at them as their biological makeup, what happens to a man who is refusing to be a man, even though he has the sexual and the biological makeup of a man? So with this argument, I'm trying to prove that being a man is no longer about having sexual organs or having thick muscles, but the social and the social cues and the cultural norms that the person tends to exhibit in a society. So therefore, as critics and as literary critics, we should open up our critical lenses to accommodate androgynous characters who come in as men, but sometimes they tend to do feminine gender, who also come in as women, but sometimes they tend to exhibit masculine gender. So gender can be seen as performative in this work, whereby I argued that in some of the works that I'm studying, we see whereby men are getting pregnant, like in the quiet violence of dreams, and is worthy of, I should mention that in Soyinka's The Interpreter, there is a place where he argued that he is getting pregnant for a long time, his sex has been changing, sex change could creep up slowly on a man. This is showing that there could be some sort of hermaphrodite in African literature and androgynous characterization. So in this case, how do we study these sort of characters? Should we go with them based on the kind of gender they portray, or should we look at their social cues, and we should look at the cultural phenomenon that they exhibit in the society? I argue that if gender is thought of having to be fixed and to be directed from sex, what happens to a woman who refuses to do or perform femininity and a man who refuses to perform masculinity? Therefore, we see the controversy in literature and in the discursive space, whereby we are getting unconventional practice of gender, masculine men, feminine boys, transsexuals, hermaphrodites, and transgender. So I argue that no one is born with a gender. It is something that we all acquire and product of societal reconfiguration. However, sex is factic and factual, but gender can be changed and gender can be reconstructed. So therefore, as literary critics, it is worthy of note that we tend to understand our characterization based on not just what the person is, but what the person is being in society. In discussing Judy Bear's Working with Shadows, we can see instances whereby the main character is portrayed as somebody who is too clean to be a man, who dresses as a woman, who is very calm and quiet and collected. These traits are known to be masculine traits, but these are portrayed as feminine, these are portrayed as masculine traits in the book, in the work. But we can also see that these are not traits that we can associate with man. So how do we tend to understand a character like that? My argument now is, should we open up our schema of characterization to take in and understand characters based on their social cues, based on their behaviors, and not just based on biological and pathological makeup? Because it's worthy of mention that a man in contemporary queer literatures has gone beyond possessing a penis, and a woman has gone beyond possessing a vagina. Now, what happens to a man who has a penis but doesn't act as a man? So this supports the argument by gender theorists like Judy Butler, like Osowski, like Adrian Rich, who argues that gender is performative and gender can be restructured and constructed based on the person's societal cues and not based on what the person is being biologically. So in conclusion, I argue that gender and sex have proven that female and male are significations that need to remain open in queer spaces. To understand characterization in Judibia's Working with Shadows and K.C.L. Oduika's Required Violence of Dreams, my essay argued that it is pertinent to show that sexuality and biology do not guarantee a character's sexual orientation, his or her being male or female, but how the person shows themselves in the world, their performative acts and behavioral attributes will most probably designate queer characters in particular gender category. The characterization of Shepo in the Quiet Violence of Dreams, Sebastian in the Quiet Violence of Dreams, West in the Quiet Violence of Dreams, and Adrian in Working with Shadows shows that gender needs to remain open to critical analysis by literary critics and need to be studied based on societal cues and not as biological phenomenon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yakubu, most importantly for sticking to time. So I think that concludes the presentations. We are well in time to take responses and questions, and okay, yeah, we'll take them. So let me just quickly. So I think I will just let me just in 1 minute or two go through some of the make one or two comments, and then I will allow the audience to ask their questions. And we still, I'm sure we'll have enough time for the presenters to respond. Okay, Meto, are you still there? Meto, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Like I said, I've thanked you earlier for that presentation. Your work explores compulsory heterosexuality in Annie Kayode's work using system justification theory. I think one of the interesting picks from your presentation is that internalized homophobia is worse than homophobia. I think is an area we should begin to project and foreground. While the attention has been so much on homophobia, we should do more in looking at the critical angles around internalized homophobia. So I thank you for highlighting that. But please, I also want to know your view. Is the writer sympathetic or condemning or negotiating or merely narrating these experiences from the work you studied? It's important we also know, is the writer sympathetic or is the writer condemning or just merely highlighting these issues? And it's also important, I want to know, how does this synchronize with the theme of the panel? You might also I want you to also reconcile that, the coming of age and of rage. So just, even if it's in 1 minute, to see how you can reconcile that. Okay, Nebife, you are there, right? Cassandra, you're still there?
I'm here.
Okay. You looked at navigating faith, society, and identity via a study of selected works of Desha, Phil, Yao, and Suleiman Adonai, with queer theory as your theoretical focus. You raised one or two issues. The church being more or less major stumbling block around the much expected progress around these issues, which and also the idea of crushing on a pastor's wife, which I said that is wahala for dead body. Maybe crushing on a pastor and then at the same time crushing on a pastor's wife. So I want to know if it's possible you looked at that, because we should also begin to look at every other area or issue around the same-sex relationship. Do you think, I want to know, the religion, that's faith, culture, that's society, which one do you think poses a greater threat in making progress around these issues? Do you think is it religion? Do you think it's culture? Which one poses a greater? I may want to be enlightened if actually you looked at that in your study. And then the works you study, are they fictional works? You should have told us. And then how do they advance the scope of this panel? So just note them down quickly. We'll come back to them. Osimiri, okay. Yeah, ethics of homosexuality, a Yoruba perspective from anthropological and sociological perspective. You are well loaded, but time didn't allow you to exhaust your arsenals. However, I think one of the things I picked is that why should we bother about people's privacy? To a reasonable extent, sexual relationship is more or less a private thing. And then you are questioning, why should we even bother with people's privacy or the way they decide to identify? And then, but I want to know, is your work a field work or a quantitative analysis where you begin to interrogate textual materials? I want to know, how do you expect, or how did you come about some of these ideas, Yoruba perspective you try to foreground in your paper? And okay, I think basically that's what I just want to asked in your paper. Then Yakubu, you looked at gender as performance, and I think when you are presenting it, it occurred to me that somehow I feel like we've been a bit the society, African society is a bit hypocritical around issues, or that been unfair around issues that has to do with same-sex relationship. Because even if we try to argue whether it's a Western import, and let's assume it's a Western import, I'm not saying so. We've accepted a lot of things from the West. Medically, we've accepted even the process of giving birth. A lot of African mothers have already adjusted. Religion, technology, even the food we eat. Why is this why have we refused to also accept this as so much assumed Western? So it's also an issue we will look at. Why we've accepted other things that we assume foreign, why are we poking on this particular one, refusing to accept it? So thank you so much for your presentations. I will go to the audience to take number your questions, and then we'll go from there. Ugochukwu, Anadi, I'm sure
I'm here. I'm here.
I will take you one today. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do we 5? Okay, 5. Okay. So even though we have about 28 minutes or so, let's also try to utilize it properly by make sure your question is not another lecture or presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so can I go now?
Yeah.
Okay, so to Dr. Peter Osimiri, the first section, he was trying to determine whether homosexuality is un-African. So I just want to know how he defines Africanity, like what is African and then what is un-African. So if he's asking the question, is homosexuality African, is he asking whether there have been people in traditional African society who were attracted to same-sex, or is he asking whether there have been societies in traditional African in the traditional African setting that accepted that same-sex? You know, these are two different things. And I would also like to know whether he engaged the Thabo Nsibi's study. He mentioned he engaged Seva Tamele's own. I've read the study. So Thabo Nsibi also did something on that in 2011. I think the lies we have been told on homosexuality in Africa. So maybe that can help him. And then the last presenter was where he was talking of the identity, whether we should go with the biological, sex, or the way the person presents himself in the society, and how to reconcile the two. I just want to suggest there's this work by Robin. I think that's Robin Dembroff, if I'm correct, who have done something on that also. Robin Dembroff was looking at a way to look beyond the biological sex and the person's presentation. So it kind of brought a different form of identity they called agential identity. Yeah, I just saw the paper now. It's Yep, I'm Gay, Understanding Agential Identity by Robin Dembroff and then Catherine St. Croix. It's a 2019 paper. So I think that may also help him in his own formulation. So those are my.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. Good afternoon. My name is Chisels. So I'll start with Cassandra. Your topic, navigating faith. So I have a question. Given the differing, please can you hear me? Given the differing religions.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so So I was thinking if it would be possible to also, inculcate this into your paper. You said you want to do, or you did a comparative study. So I have a question. Given the different religions and belief systems we have in the world, right? And given that the world is heterogeneous, what is the role of religion in sexuality? And also, is it even supposed to have a role? Like you said, it's a very private, matter. So that also, you talked about how these women in one of the books, how they were waiting for their husbands to come and take them. But then when that didn't happen, they started, engaging in, homosexuality. So I also want to ask, isn't that a failing in the, what's that Bible, this thing you quoted, where they said your man or your husband will come out. So isn't that a failing, given that what the rule or whatever, or the order they are giving you is not happening? So why are we depending on that? That's another question. So that is for that. That's for your own. So the second person is, I'm sorry, Dr. Peter Oshimiri. So have a lot of notes for you, given that you want to do something on anthropology. Anthropology is very important because you're documenting, people's history, evolution, and the rest of it. So my first question, so before I ask my question, you know how we are in part of the world. If your father disowns you, what does he do? He strikes your name out. In the past, given like all this history, or you have been disowned. If you go to all this lineage, they remove your name, they cancel it. So I have a question. Is it absurd to think that, the little, you said you found pockets of information or documentation. So is it absurd to think that the little documentation of queer people is as a result of, them disowning queer people? Erasure, not documenting their history. So it is very important to think that, because I think you also mentioned, okay, so before I go to that one, I also want to, minority, in the Bible, for example, we have, in the Bible, we have less information about women than men. So how they erase minority experiences. So that is that. So I have other questions, but let me.
Thank you. Who else? Are you doing? Okay.
All right, so I want to appreciate all the speakers. My first question is I'm Jane Adeniji, is to Ifeoma Cassandra. All right, so you mentioned creating safe spaces for these individuals. So I would like to know what kind of safe spaces can be created within the religious circle for them, given the challenges that you have raised in your paper. So that's the first question. Then the second question is to Dr. Peter. You talked about homosexuality interrupting human perpetuity. Okay, so what role can surrogacy play in that? Thank you. That's
My name is My name is Ashaoli Peter, and my question is to Dr. Peter concerning the introduction that I gave. So on African aspects. So you mentioned the president of Kenya and then the interaction with the president of USA. And then in the slide, you made a statement that the president of Kenya said it's not their own culture. But when you were presenting, you said you didn't use Kenya, but you used Africa. So I want to know if you are using Kenya as a synecdoche for Africa. And the second question is, if some African countries are against the notion of same-sex relationship, do they speak for all African society, including the tribes also? And what is your reason for that? That is my question.
Okay, my name is Ephraim. My question is directed to Mrs. I think Ifeoma, the lady in the Zoom call. So, why is it that religious people have a problem when you view their perspective with logic, but they always bring logic when it comes to sexuality, as regards to biological factors? Do you understand my question?
Not yet. Please, could you expand on
Ms. Cassandra, did you hear me? Okay, so the question is, religious people always have an issue when you bring logic towards religion, when you approach religion with logic, because if you approach religion with logic, you discover half of the things in this religious text don't actually make any sense, but they always hammer on logic when they are regarding sexual subjects, with the biological male-female reproductive system. So why is it that?
Could you be specific, please? Could you give an example?
I think I'm very specific. I don't know how specific I can get. So
What do you mean by logic? What do you mean by logic?
okay, I explained. Okay, when they say God created the heaven and the earth, and then apparently there was nothing, but then all of a sudden something happened. That does not make any sense. I am sorry if I offend anybody. It's just not logical. Okay, so but then you have like the sexual description of male and female. The male has a penis, the female has a vagina. But we have the last speaker spoke about people identifying as male in society and female in society, despite having different reproductive organs. So why are they always demonized? Using that, like, it's logical, when biologically it's logical when you say, oh, you're a man because you have a penis, you're a woman because you have a vagina. So that's my question. Do you understand, Nama?
Okay, I'll try to answer when the time comes.
Somebody else worded better.
No, I think perhaps she doesn't just understand. Okay. Thank you. So I just have some questions and then some comments, and I'm going to be very brief. The first, so I'll start with the question with the lady who presented on religion, and I think that she's going to have a lot of work to do in that respect to make her work better. Because reconciling religious doctrines with homosexuality it's going to be difficult for her based on what she wants, as she has told us in her conclusion, for religion to make a safe space for homosexuality. In the first instance, it is religion that makes the space unsafe. So unless they are going to rewrite religion in a way that it permits these practices, because it is religion that forbids it. So unless she's asking for a rewriting of religion, then I don't see how religion can help in making any space for the discourse of homosexuality. That is one. And the question he asked is very relevant also in that regard. If you say in Christianity, for example, that God is 3 in 1, it is irrational. It is illogical. You can only come to terms with it if you have the belief. So that's what he's saying. So why then you say now that same sex is irrational because it involves 2 penises, 2 vaginas. I think that's what he means. So you have a lot to do with the religion.
You have like we take the second set of questions. Thank you. It has been. You want to add?
I just want the detail of the 2 comments. When we talk about logic, there's a presumption in those comments that there is one universal central on very stable, incontestable logic. Yeah. That's the problem with those questions.
Okay.
Yeah. So a religion has their logics. A religion has its logic. So if you say it's illogical, what logic? Although I get the point, but what logic? Because that person has another logic.
Yeah,
Whose logic?
Whose logic?
When we talk of logic,
let's not lose focus. Please, thank you. Prof, let's not lose focus. Questions, the presenters.
Science disputes are very fast. So science backs up.
We're moving away from the cross of the matter.
Okay, should go back.
Thank you. We are moving away. We could just once they stop recording, we stay back. And okay, let the presenters. Can you who in the order of presentation? Just 3 minutes to respond because we have barely 14 minutes to leave. So Meto.
Okay. Let me start with your first question. You asked if the writer was sympathetic, to homosexuality or sex-sense relationship. Of course, he was. It was so glaring from the first sentence in the text to the last sentence. It was also made obvious by the presentation, giving us two characters, one who has embraced his sexuality, a homosexual, and then we have, that is Shegun, and then we have August, who is kind of still in the closet. Then coming to the second question, you said, how does this paper connect to the overall theme, that is rethinking LGBTQ narratives in Africa, coming of age and rage? It is so obvious. The book itself, the exploration of compulsory heterosexuality. First of all, let me start answering the question by stating that, let me look at the rage part. It is appalling that in 2024, we are still talking about if people should be with the same sex or the different sex or same sex. It doesn't actually make sense. And as far as to be as far as it continues to repeat itself or manifest itself in different forms of violence or stigmatization meted out to people of different sexuality that is not heterosexuality, of course, it will continue to be a subject. But I want to say something. With the implementation of the SSMPA, because from the setting of the text, it was set before the SSMPA. I remember the comment that was made by Shegun after the bill was passed into law. He said, who sent these people? Who told them that we're even interested in getting married? Because in implementing this particular bill covers people that would have remained, people that homosexuals that are not even interested in getting married or in amplifying their sexuality. But there is something I want to finally say that ties the entire work to the coming of age and rage. It's not just that the text is a Bildungsroman about two young homosexuals, but the fact that when you look at the text and when it comes to compulsory heterosexuality in the text, there is something that is referred to as, we have institutionalized racism. But when it comes to homosexuality in a country like Nigeria, there is institutionalized violence. Let me put that in quotes, because people take laws into their hands. They beat up homosexuals every day on the street. When we look at the case of Shegun, one of the major characters in the text, he was beat up by young boys that stay in the same hostel as him. And he carried the traumatic experiences and as a result of the beating of his person or the kind of stigmatization meted out his person for a long time. And when it got to a point when he could no longer manage the way he feels about his experiences, he had to take his life and he had to commit suicide. So it is this conversation, it is very, very important that we continue to have this conversation. So this is my answer to the second question, the connection of the presentation to the overall theme of the conference, of this, sorry, the panel. Thank you.
Metro, can you quickly respond? Like, try to be brief. Yeah, 2 minutes for your response.
It's Meto that just.
Okay, sorry, Cassandra.
Yes, so thank you very much for the patience. I'll try to answer that. Prof, you asked if the texts are fictional works or not. They are fictional works. The Secret Lives of Church Ladies is a collection of short stories, while Silence is My Mother Tongue is also a fictional work set in a refugee camp in Sudan.
Can you speak up?
Can you hear me? I said that the texts are fictional works. You asked if they were fictional works.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're fictional works.
Okay.
Okay. Also, you asked if I think the society or the church, that's faith, which of these poses some greater challenge to the LGBT plus community? I would say that for the religious folks, faith is a major threat because the religious people even distance themselves from societal expectations. For instance, in the society, premarital sex is not really frowned at, but in church, for the religious folks, premarital sex is frowned at. Sex is only permitted within the context of marriage. But for the unreligious folk, I think they have the society to grapple with. I hope you understand my answer.
Which do you think is more challenging? Okay, but it's okay.
Yeah, because there are two set of people, the religious man wouldn't want to be placed side by side with the ordinary man, as the society would say. So I wouldn't also want to lump them together. But I think for the religious person, faith poses a greater challenge than society. Also, somebody asked if somebody asked them if the church or faith didn't fail in fulfilling the expectations of these church ladies, for instance, thereby pushing them into homosexuality. For the religious man, I think that patience is one of the virtues preached. Patience while trusting God. You should have for instance, one of the texts, the lady who asked her female friend to touch her down there just clocked 30, all right? But we know that in the Bible, even when God promised Abraham he was going to give him a male child at the age of 70, Abraham waited to the age of 100, all right? So I feel that faith goes with patience as a virtue. So even as a religious person, you have patience while you trust God for the fulfillment of those things that you believe. I think that is my humble answer to that. Somebody else asked if it's illogical. It depends. Logic is a personal thing. It is relative. What you would term logic might not be what the religious man terms logic. In religion, most times, you do not approach it from sensory perception in terms of logic, all right? You might say you were not there when heaven and earth were created, so it might be a fallacy, but you can see penis and you can even feel vagina. Well, that's for the ordinary man, as the religious man would say. So I wouldn't want to go into logic there. Faith is believing even when you have not seen it, even when you have not seen it, you still believe that it is. So my controversial conclusion that speaks, can you? Hello? Hello?
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, wait, can you, okay. I'm sure the email address, you can always find the email address of these presenters, and the conversation continues even offline. I'm referring to Chiso. Can you address the ones we have?
Okay, so thank you very much. I think I have about 4 or 5 questions there. Thank you for your interventions. The first question from the chair of the panel here. Why should we bother with people's privacy? I just use a rule of the
question.
Okay, it was okay, good. Okay, so I don't have to respond to that, so I'll just go ahead. I think that the other question is whether this work was did I do a field work and all that. In philosophy, we don't do field work, but that is the convention. I'm thinking somebody like me is thinking that we could actually break that convention because I'm doing a master's in bioethics and I see that field work could be very useful and all of that. So basically, this work is based on textual analysis, and I'm aware that in order for me to unearth the beliefs of the Yoruba, I need to think about their folklore, their songs, their proverbs, and even the discussion on social media could be very relevant to this. So I'm aware of that. Having said that, the second question is about how do I define Africanity? That's a very serious one. I once read something about Achille Mbembe was saying that what you call Africa is actually a potpourri of multiple significations, which over time, because of repetition, have come to be called Africa. So I understand that itself can be very controversial, but it's very simple here. When those people say that it's alien, when they say that it is not what you call African, what they really mean is that this is not indigenous to our culture, as simple as that. So I think I answered that. Then the third question, what role can
No, excuse me, the indigenous, is it that there are not indigenous people practicing it or that there is not indigenous acceptance of it? That's my point.
So the thing about African is whether there are people practicing it in Africa. So the other question is the issue of attitude, acceptance. It's a different question entirely. Yeah, so let's go there. So let me so the question about surrogacy. Yeah, surrogacy can do something about this thing about procreation and all of that. But you see, I think surrogacy also has its own problems. For instance, somebody can get the surrogate mother can get attached to the baby and say, I don't want to raise this baby anymore. That's another. So we create more problems if we go the way of surrogacy. Yeah, that's the answer to that question. Then the final one, it's about, yeah, I like the thing you said about Kenya. Let me say something really. You see, I didn't really intend to discuss Africa. I'm aware that I could run into trouble if I start saying that Yoruba and I'm generalizing to Africa. So I didn't want to do that. But the reason why I needed to deal with Africa, where I'm really going is Yoruba beliefs on homosexuality. I had to deal with Africa because, like I said, there are very powerful voices at that level that have denounced and suggested that homosexuality is a foreign thought, it's an imposition and all of that. So I just want to deal with that matter so that we can show that indeed there are pockets of practices of homosexuality in. I'm coming to that religion thing. I didn't want to ask about religion. Yeah, I'm coming there. I won't forget. So basically it was a springboard to discussing the Yoruba. It's not. I'm not trying to say African and them. So I agree with you that I cannot generalize based on one, but I was going to go to Yoruba eventually. Now to talk about religion, I think that we can actually speculate. I think it's the whole thing about religion is speculative. You know what? It's a possibility. That's what I'm trying to say. It's possible that the reason why we don't get enough information about this group that we're talking about is because they were erased from history or erased in documentation and all of that. But you see, like I would say here, I would say that we will not know whether erasure took place until we know there is erasure. That's my response.
Okay, thank you. We are on time.
There are pockets of instances of
We are on time. We are going offline to continue this conversation. Continues during lunch break. At dinner, anywhere we meet ourselves, the email addresses are here. Thank you so much for being wonderful audience, for witnessing the finale of this panel. I hope we see you again. Thank you.